Hi Vicky.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, I wanted to ask you about a trial that you were a jury on. What was the trial? What was
It
the case?
was a child molestation charge, actually multiple, 8 charges.
When was this trial?
This trial was about 3 years ago, October.
Hey, was this the first trial that you've ever been a jury on?
Yes, it was. Actually, it was. It was a long trial as well.
And where did the trial take place?
The trial took place here in Georgia, in Noonan,
And where did the crime or crimes take place?
also here in Noonan,
Same city?
Georgia, yes.
Can you tell us what the first day was like when you found out what the case was and what that was like for you?
Yeah, when I heard what the case was, my stomach dropped actually. It made me really uncomfortable, being that I have girls of my own, and the abuse was against 8-year-olds.
What was the reaction of some of the other jurors?
Devastation. I think we all were surprised when we found out what the charges were.
Do you remember how many women versus how many men were on the case or were serving as jurors?
Men versus women, it was pretty even. I don't recall exactly how many men there were and how many women, but it was, maybe there were a few more women than men on the jury. I just don't recall exactly.
And the person that committed the crime, can you tell us about that person?
The person that committed the crime was a gentleman around 60 years old. His wife ran a daycare in their home. She'd been watching these girls for many years, many of them since they were infants. And the gentleman was also in the home and assisted his wife in taking care of the kids. Yet, unbeknownst to his wife, he was molesting some of the girls in the playroom.
And so how did this crime come to be discovered?
A couple of the girls started talking to their parents, and the parents started asking more questions and doing a little bit of the investigation themselves. And of course, immediately took their kids out of the home.
How many kids were there?
4,
What ages were they?
7 and 8. The girls were 7 and 8 years old.
All girls?
Yes, all girls.
And there were 8 charges?
Yes, because some of them were molestation, child endangerment, various charges, multiple charges from each one of the victims.
Okay. So what was it like walking into the courtroom that first day and seeing the kids, seeing the defendant?
The kids were not in the courtroom, but their parents were, parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and, other adults of the family. And it was really sad, actually. Very, very sad. But the kids did not come in until a couple of them, 3 of them actually testified. One of them got on the stand.
And what was it like seeing the gentleman that committed these crimes? What was it like?
Really creepy.
Really creepy.
Really creepy.
Why? How so?
Well, it's probably a preconceived notion, knowing that he was being charged with these crimes, made him look even creepier than if I had just seen him walking down the street. But you just have to wonder when you look at somebody like that, what is going through their head, what are they thinking?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they're doing these, but at the same time you're trying to give everybody, give him a fair trial. Just because he was accused of the crimes didn't automatically mean he had done them, and that's what we were there for, to decide if we felt that there was sufficient evidence against him.
And to convict someone guilty of a crime, what do you need to do that?
Well, we needed several pieces of information. We did use the testimony from the girls that we got. We had some information from his computers. One of the charges was child pornography against him, and so we used the evidence from his computer. But you had to be able to say beyond a reasonable doubt that that evidence was good enough to use.
Mm-hmm. And how many days was the trial?
5.
5 days. At what point did these little girls come into the courtroom?
They came in about day 3, I think it was. They weren't all on the same day. The girls were split up a little bit.
What was it like to see them?
Brought tears to my eyes to see the girls. Some of them held up really well, and one of them, we couldn't understand a single word she said. She was crying so hard. She had a social worker go up and sit on the stand with her and, kept telling her, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, you're safe, it's okay. But, as you can imagine, it's very difficult for somebody that age to talk about what an older man had done to her with him sitting in the room 15 feet away.
Wow. And some of the other girls were able to testify and share their experience.
They were. And one of them was actually very graphic, which was one of the huge pieces of evidence that we were able to use against him because of her description, etc. We were able to honestly believe that a girl of her age would not know some of the things that she testified to.
Oh my goodness. Emotionally for you, when they were talking about their experiences, what were you going through emotionally as you were listening to their stories?
Well, I was trying to fight back the tears, but emotionally I just kept thinking about my kids and having, been a part of raising 4 girls. It was just beyond comprehension that something like this could happen. And thinking about the parents and hearing the parents sobbing in the courtroom, it was heart-wrenching because those parents blamed themselves even though they did absolutely nothing wrong. It had nothing to do with the parents.
Did you know anything about childhood sexual abuse, any statistics or any knowledge whatsoever before you?
I had no statistics that I was aware of at all going into it. I mean, I know it happens, and it happens way too much, but I did not have any specific statistics.
1 in 5 children under the age of 17 will be sexually abused. It's astounding.
That's huge.
It
It's
is.
astounding. I did know that most of the time, or a high percentage of them, are from people they know,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the case here. They knew him, they trusted him, they cared about him.
I want to go back and talk about this girl that you said was had a social worker with her and she was crying. What was her testimony like?
It was just sobs. They asked questions and she would try to talk, but she was sobbing so hard that she could barely catch her breath. And they put her through that for approximately 15 minutes before they finally said, okay, that's it, we're getting nowhere. And I can honestly say, hearing her parents sobbing in the courtroom, feeling for her friends' parents doing the same thing, it really, there were several of us women that were fighting back the tears as well.
And so this trial lasted 5 days. At the end of the day, what do you do? I'm not familiar with the process, so at the end of the day, when you're done with court, what is it that the jurors do?
On a daily basis, you're told in the very beginning that you're not allowed to discuss it with anybody until the trial is over. So at the end of the day, you go home, you try not to think about it, but when you've been subjected to that kind of information and that kind of abuse and some of the photographs that we had as evidence, you dream, you have nightmares about it. It's hard to get it out of your head. Mm-hmm. Because you know that stuff goes on, but until you're actually, a part of the process, you don't realize how devastating it really is.
And so during these testimonies and the presentation of evidence, what was the demeanor of this man?
He was emotionless. He had no emotion. No emotion whatsoever. I know that there were several of us that kept looking at his wife, and you could tell that she was flabbergasted, I guess. She was just, amazed, because she too was not aware that this was going on in her house.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's skip ahead. When the trial came to a close on that 5th day, what happened?
Well, we were in deliberation for quite a few hours and had taken a vote. On the first vote, it was pretty much a split decision. We had to vote on each one of the counts.
When you were discussing it, what kind of things were you discussing, deliberating?
Well, the first thing we did was we took a vote and saw where we were, because if it were all unanimous one way or the other, then we were done. We didn't need to keep voting on something that was a unanimous decision. Mm-hmm. So once we voted and it was not unanimous, then we just started questioning each other and said, well, what evidence was there that would make you say that he was not guilty, to the people that said that felt he was not guilty. Mm-hmm. And then those of us that did feel that he was guilty, we pled our case and said, what about this? How can you say that's not good enough evidence? How can you say there's any doubt about that? Mm-hmm. And so we bantered back and forth. And then after, a little while, we took another vote. And it was really interesting because some people had switched both ways. So we weren't necessarily any better off than we were the first vote. We had just different players. Mm-hmm. So we had to continue to talk and bring up the evidence. We had questions where we had to go back to the judge and say, can we see this part of the transcript again, or can we see this evidence again? Because you can't possibly make enough notes or remember everything that was said. And one person might remember one piece one way, and one person remembers that same piece a different way based on what was said. So we just keep going through the process. Mm-hmm.
And these, when you were in deliberation with the jurors, was it were the discussions really heated? Were emotions really high?
At times they were. Mostly at the very end, there was one charge, and unfortunately it was the charge for the little girl that could not testify, that everybody but one person felt that he was not guilty, and that one person felt that he was guilty and did not want to change their vote. But when it got right down to it, it was either going to be a hung jury and the trial would have to be done all over again, or he would still do a life sentence based on the other 8 charges.
Mm-hmm.
So he was guilty on 8 charges and not guilty on 1 charge.
What was the one charge that he was not found guilty?
It was the child molestation against the one girl that could not testify.
And why was he found not guilty?
Because there wasn't enough evidence against her, because she could not testify as to what he had done to her.
Okay. And so the other 7 counts he was found guilty.
Right, he was guilty, and he basically paid the same sentence as if he had been guilty of all the charges.
Okay. And so when you go back into the courtroom to announce the verdict, who's responsible for announcing that?
The jury foreman.
And who is that?
That was me.
That was you. What was that like, knowing that you had to go up there and announce 7 guilty charges and 1 innocent charge?
Broke my heart. I was the one person.
You were the one person that didn't want to change their mind.
Right. It was hard. It was hard. And you have all their parents right there and gasping. I mean, it was like a murder trial, you know, where once they heard the not guilty, all I could hear were gasps in the courtroom.
Were the kids in the courtroom
No.
that day?
The kids were not in the courtroom. The only time they were in there was individually when they were testifying. That was it.
And what was the reaction of the defendant when you read the charge?
I didn't look at him. I mean, afterwards, he just sat there. I mean, after everything was read, he just sat there. I mean, his wife gasped. I could hear her. But I was not interested in looking at him.
Do you recall ultimately what exactly the sentences that he received were?
Yes, he received a double life
A
sentence.
double life sentence.
Yes.
And do you feel that is a justified sentence?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think my personal opinion is obviously there's something wrong with a person that would do something like that to little girls. He's lost his life as a freed man, but if it were my daughter, I would expect the death penalty. So, you know, it's really hard to say.
Was the death penalty a possibility?
No.
No.
Even though he put those girls through stuff that changed their life forever.
So do you feel ultimately that justice was served?
I do.
Is there anything else you want to say about anything you felt? Any reactions from some of the other jurors?
We were all very sad. You know, obviously. I mean, my biggest thing was just that the poor parents that had to go through all this and their feeling of, you know, having it played a part in it and being at fault where they really were not at fault and there was nothing they could have done. And they did the right thing when they found out.
Do you know how long this had been going on? How long this man had been committing
You know,
these
I
crimes?
don't recall and exactly. I don't know that they knew exactly how long it had gone on, but it had been a while. I mean, probably close to a year.
Do you think it had happened previously, that there were other children
I do.
in the past?
I do. Kids that were afraid to say something because what kid wouldn't be afraid to say something? You know?
Mm-hmm. Anything else to add? Anything you want to say?
It's a terrible crime and something needs to be done. And like I said, those girls, their life has changed forever. And, you know, I'm sure they're going to need some, and have had, some heavy-duty counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Because they also need to know that it was not their fault. And they did the right thing by saying something. That I do attribute to the parents, to teach your kids to tell you if something inappropriately happens to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, luckily there, as you know, is a foundation called Defend Innocence that helps these childhood victims and their families seek counseling and raise awareness that this is a huge, huge problem and it's just getting worse and something needs to be done about it. And so Defend Innocence is a great organization to support, and I encourage everyone to go to defendinnocence.org and look at the website, see ways in which you can help. Just because knowing is half the battle, and nobody talks about it, then
Right.
Nobody knows, and you can't stop it if nobody knows.
That's
so
right.
Raising awareness is key in and of itself. So defendinnocence.org. You can also support them through my website by purchasing the Defend Innocence bundle on my unique website. Comes with a lipstick, eyeliner, a Defend Innocence bracelet, and a cream eyeshadow. So that's just one simple way that you can help the foundation and help these kids that have suffered so incredibly already in their short lives.
Defendinnocence.org.
Yes, defendinnocence.org. Thank you, Vicki, for your time. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I'm sure it's not something that is...
It's hard to talk about even this long after.
Thank you for your time.